The man running America's premier law enforcement agency couldn't clearly explain one of the most fundamental principles in our Constitution, due process. Senator Jeff Merkley had to straight up ask, have you even read the Constitution? This isn't political theater. This is a constitutional red flag waving in plain sight.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Director Patel. And so, as I understood it, you testified yesterday that you'd like to have another $1 billion added on to the FY25 level to do the additional work you'd like to do on drug interdiction, fentanyl in general, and anti-terrorism. And today you gave us a budget that requests cutting $500 million. Which is it? Do you want us to, what are you asking of this committee? To add funds, add $1 billion, or to cut $500 million?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the opportunity. What I'm asking for is that with more, I can simply do more. And I was giving examples of what more I could do. I can do the mission, and am in support of the budget here, and I'm working with appropriators and you to fill the gaps.
So you support the budget presented that cuts $500 million, but you also support us adding $1 billion should we choose to do that?
Well, I can't not support the budget as proposed, because then I would be supporting no budget.
Okay. Well, we've got those two options. We do look forward to further details from you about how you plan to modify the function of FBI on these different missions that you've highlighted today, so that we can give it the appropriate consideration. Director Patel, you're familiar with the Fifth Amendment.
Yes, Senator. And
it is really the freedom clause of the United States. It was 4 years into being a nation when Congress and the states said, hey, we have to make sure that there's not an over-aggressive government in the future that deprives us of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And you're familiar that that applies to all persons in the United States.
Yes, Senator.
So there's been a lot of concern about the several hundred immigrants who were swept off the streets of America and sent to El Salvador without due process. And does that concern you?
Senator, I'm not in a position to comment on whether or not they were given or not given due process or are supposed to be afforded due process. All the FBI did and all the FBI will continue to do is arrest those that have violated the law.
Okay, but to arrest, you have to investigate. Have you launched an investigation of this violation of the Freedom Clause of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, I don't know that I agree with your characterization.
Well, that was my first question, whether or not you agree with the Fifth Amendment and are prepared to defend it. It is your job to investigate crimes.
Yes, I agree with the Fifth Amendment. I agree with the entire Constitution, and the men and women at the FBI decide.
So are you going to launch an investigation of the reported violation of the due process of several hundred individuals?
Again, Senator, it's not for me to call the balls and strikes on it. The men and women at the FBI who are trained to open investigations will make those calls.
So you have no influence over whether an investigation is opened?
I have influence over it, but you're asking me a constitutional question. I'm not a constitutional scholar.
Well, it's actually not it's a question also of law.
But your position is that every one of those individuals is by constitutional right afforded due process. I don't know the answer to that. I'm telling you.
You haven't read the Constitution?
It says all persons. I've got it right here, but what you're saying is that every single one of the illegals that was sent down to El Salvador is supposed to be given due process pursuant.
Yeah, that's what the Constitution says. It says no person.
It doesn't say that.
It does say no person. Yeah, I'll encourage you to read it, because it's also been affirmed by the Supreme Court repeatedly. In the case of Miranda versus Arizona, held the right of all individuals, regardless of citizenship status. The Supreme Court in Reno versus Flores. I mean, but it's the plain language of the Constitution. It concerns me that you're not familiar with the core concept of due process applying to all persons as written in black and white in the Constitution.
As the first public defender who's ever served at the FBI as its director, I am more aware of due process than any predecessor in my seat. You are delineating between removal proceedings and criminal acts. My job is to investigate criminal acts. That's what we do.
You are aware that the Fifth Amendment refers to taking away liberty, and when people are arrested on the street, detained and sent out of the country, that their liberty has been taken away.
Senator, that is a constitutional question that you are asking me to answer. It's not for me to answer.
The question has already been answered by the Supreme Court that they're protected. Therefore, it's a violation of law, and it's your responsibility to open an investigation. And you're saying today you will not do so?
I am not the agency involved in removal proceedings. That is a different branch of government.
So if an agency other than the FBI violates the law and the Constitution, you will not investigate because it's a different agency?
I will investigate every violation of law.
Well, you have, but you just said you're not investigating.
No. You and I are in disagreement on what is a violation of law. I have yet to hear from the Supreme Court your position as you have adjudicated it.
Well, very, very interesting, because the Supreme Court's been very clear, and I had heard you were trained in the law, so I expected maybe you would try to uphold it. You also took an oath to the Constitution.
Thank you for the reminder.
Well, it's important to remind you, since you're apparently unfamiliar with the very basics of the core protection of freedom in our Constitution.
What I am familiar with is protecting the American public, and that's what
Let me close with one question, Mr. Chairman. Will you make sure that due process in every action of the FBI is completely honored under your time as director?
Will I ensure that due process is followed?
Yes.
Under the Constitution?
Completely. Send that message throughout the FBI that due process must be followed, is constitutionally required. Make sure that it's done under your direction.
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
What we just watched between Senator Jeff Merkley and FBI Director Kash Patel is one of those moments that should stop every American in their tracks, not because of partisan fireworks, but because of what it says about constitutional literacy at the highest levels of law enforcement. When Merkley asked Patel if he was familiar with the Fifth Amendment, it wasn't a gotcha. It was a plea to the bedrock of American democracy. No person, no matter who they are, can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That's one of the most sacred protections in the entire Constitution, deliberately written to shield citizens and non-citizens alike from government overreach. But Patel's response, "I'm not a constitutional scholar," spoke volumes. This isn't about needing a PhD in law, it's about basic principle. Due process isn't some obscure footnote. It's the line that separates rule of law from rule by whim. Yet the head of the FBI, an agency with life-altering power over millions, shrugged off responsibility for upholding it. Merkley's questions about immigrants being rounded up and deported without hearings went straight to America's moral and legal heart. These aren't numbers on a spreadsheet, they're human beings, many fleeing violence, seeking safety, chasing the same dream that brought millions before them. The Constitution doesn't say citizens only, it says no person, and the framers chose that word on purpose. The principle is universal, so when Patel tried passing the buck, saying it's not his job to judge if due process was followed, Merkley pushed back. Because that's exactly the mindset that chips away at accountability. History's full of abuses that started with officials saying, "Not my lane." Every erosion of rights begins when someone in power decides the Constitution doesn't apply to those people. And that's the real danger here. Bureaucratic deflections like "it's not for me to call balls" and strikes become shields for inaction, or worse. The FBI director doesn't need to be a scholar to know when basic rights are on the line. He needs the moral backbone to say, "This crosses the line." Merkley's frustration was raw, and it should be ours too. This isn't left versus right, it's law versus power. The Constitution isn't a menu you pick from, it's a promise every official swears to keep. Break it for one group, and the door swings open for anyone. Because the hard truth is, once we let due process slide for some, we weaken it for all. That's why Merkley's stand mattered. He wasn't just defending immigrants, he was defending the soul of American democracy. And that moment when Patel said, "I have it right here," holding the Constitution like a prop, it said everything. Owning the book isn't the same as living its values. Too many in power wave it around, quote it selectively, use it as scenery. The real test is whether they honor it when it's hard, when it challenges their own side. Merkley's closer. That's what the Constitution says. I encourage you to read it. Wasn't just a zinger, it was a call to conscience. A reminder that knowing the words means nothing if you don't grasp their moral weight. This exchange should alarm everyone. When the nation's top lawman hedges on one of the Bill of Rights' core protections, we all need to ask, where is federal power headed? Are we sliding toward a system where convenience trumps legality? Where government picks who gets rights? Progressives, conservatives, independents, anyone who values the Constitution, should be paying attention. The fight for due process isn't partisan, it's human. It's about keeping power in check, treating people as people, and making sure the Constitution stays a living shield against overreach. Senator Merkley did exactly what we elect leaders to do. Hold power to principle. No exceptions. His message echoes way beyond that room. Democracy only endures when its guardians refuse to look away. If this hits you like it should, stay engaged. Support voices that defend rights without qualifiers. Demand answers from those with immense power. And never let bureaucratic jargon drown out the moral call for justice. Because the Constitution isn't just words on paper, it's our contract with government. And when officials sidestep it, it's on us to hold them to it. If you believe in the rule of law, in justice that doesn't pick sides, then keep watching.